Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I'm here. My name's Mark Aylward. I'm here with my friend and colleague Jim Gurley, and we've been doing this podcast now for almost a year. This is episode number 50, and I just wanted to mention that because I think we should probably have some sort of a celebration online of some kind. So we'll see what that looks like maybe after the fact, Jim. Today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but the foundational topic is going to be manifestation, and I guess the power of the subconscious mind. So if you go to our wheel, our foundational wheel, and you start in the center with the self, the subconscious mind would probably be in that mental health, emotional area. But it does, and we're going to find out today just how much it touches on all five areas of our wheel. And I think, Jim, you brought to my attention a podcast that you listened to last week, a neuroscientist by the name of Dr. James Doty, Doty. And I think he was on the Lewis Howe's podcast, The School of Greatness. I hope I've pronounced those names correctly, but let me just read from the show notes, the first paragraph or so, because I think it puts what we're going to talk about in perspective, and it might even be helpful for both of us to get us going. He's claiming to explore the fascinating science of manifestation and how it connects to our beliefs, emotions, and actions. Dr. Doty breaks down the difference between the law of attraction and manifestation, shining a light on the immense power of our subconscious mind. He shares how heart vibrations are stronger than brain waves and explains why changing decades-old belief systems is so challenging. He opens up about overcoming limiting beliefs, the crucial role of positivity in shifting our mindset, and how thoughts and emotions directly influence what we manifest. He also digs into the importance of love versus lack in driving impact, why synchronicities matter, and how we can balance being unattached to outcomes while staying open to magic. So that's a mouthful. And, Jim, as you well know, we both, to some extent, certainly myself, have been digging into the subconscious mind for a while. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, thanks for reading that, because I think that it just kind of sets the stage for why this particular episode. I listen to his stuff quite a bit, but this particular topic and this one resonate with me is because some of these things I know you're doing in your daily SOS. I know this is something for years I've been following, and we remember the law. It was the one book, The Secret.
Mm-hmm.
That was what he touches on that. But The Secret, it was all about manifesting good things in your life, and but the law of attraction, manifestation, those are real things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
What I appreciated about him is he talks about um, how the human brain uh, how it deals with adversity. We talk about adversity a lot, right? Adversity, a setback, how that really you can come out of that on the other end much better by choice. I often say what doesn't break you makes you, and he goes
Yep.
deep into that and about how these things happen in everybody's life, but it always comes back to it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to what happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I what I this this discussion was more about how the human brain functions, the mechanics of the human brain, how it's wired together in a way that they know. Sure, all brains, like all arms and legs, are similar to human beings, but everyone is different in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but particularly about your past and our framework of these five areas of your life, starting with self in the center. I think it's really becoming our self-awareness, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
really, especially after episode 50. If it's one thing that we always go to, it's the center of the flywheel, and it's self-awareness. With self-awareness comes our health, mental health, our physical health, our profession, whether you're an entrepreneur or work for a company, money, two areas, again, scarcity, abundance, others, people, um, when women, men, it's different, and then a worldview. And we talk about that, right? Our politics today, but our childhood, and that plays a huge role in how we view the world. But it also, and he talks about his adversity. His mother attempted to commit suicide, something you can relate to, right?
Mine was successful.
Yeah, and it's part of who you are, whether and
It
I think
is.
you've got a great, I think, outlook on that. And he talked that, and he talks about his father being, I think, was in prison or something, and then he applied for medical school, and at all odds with a 2.5 grade average, somehow got into medical school, and that changed his life, and now he's a neuroscientist. He also shares a story about a fundraiser they did in Aspen, and there was a billionaire, and not a fundraiser, it was somebody was being honored, and he had this conversation with the guy. I guess he was in his 80s or something, and he was bragging about this watch and his cars and all these different things, and how he wasn't happy, even though he had all these things, sharing with this neuroscientist. But this particular guy, that was his comfort zone of being unhappy. That's also probably what manifested all these things that he had in his life. I thought it was kind of a cool outcome. He's like, it's not really about that. Your happiness, there's nothing, your happiness, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, I should say your success doesn't necessarily make you happy. And so he also gets into that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's so many things that are going through my mind now, and I want to kind of connect it to some of the rationale behind why we do this podcast at all. And one of the pressing reasons in my mind is to encourage men to talk about stuff that particularly men, don't talk about very often, and operating and offering up a forum, an environment in which we admit we're all imperfect. Everyone's imperfect. Men are imperfect. And I'm doing a lot of work in this space. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I've not the SOS course that you're familiar with, but this new one that I've been in now for 5 weeks. They're both very small amounts of time per day, but they both have everything to do with manifestation and visualization and meditation and energy. And, these things, it wasn't long ago where these things were considered witchcraft, and it's only been recently that men like us have started talking out loud about this stuff. And I'm not trying to take any credit for that. I'm just saying, historically, particularly our generation, we were told to stuff those feelings down and not and just move on, rub some dirt on it and move on. And there's an interesting balance between maintaining your fortitude and your strength and opening yourself up to vulnerability and talking about things that involve emotions and feelings. And I think you can do both. I think you can be a man and do both. I think, as a matter of fact, if you do both, you're more of a man than if you only do one or the other. So, but it's one of the current exercises I'm doing is, you guys, like, find a picture of you when you were a kid, like 3, 4, or 5 years old, and put it up. And every day I want you to look at it, and I want you to see the beautiful human being that you were, and recognize that that's who you still are. That beautiful human being is still inside you. And the rest of it's just experiential and how you respond to things. But to your point earlier, if you go back, and it's a fascinating exercise, dudes, I would highly recommend that everyone does it. I'm sure it'll have a different impact on everybody, because it's, I had a pretty good childhood. Some people had a pretty shitty childhood, and that's just a relative term. But it's still the same experience. Like, I'm looking at a picture of me. I think I'm 5, maybe 4, and I'm in a suit with a bow tie on. I'm holding an egg, and I got a big smile on my face, and I'm missing a couple of teeth. And I'm like, that kid's not trouble. That kid, he's going to do good things in the world. He's a good human being. And it was really, it was almost overwhelming when I first did it. And I found myself smiling the whole time I was looking at the picture. So anyway, it's not a tangent. It's directly related to what we're doing. Your past can determine your future if you don't address it. And
let's touch on that for a second. So it turns out that the human brain in our childhood, it's not fully developed. So it's like a dog. It lives in the moment, and it doesn't have any past history. So the negativity, that's why a kid will go from playing to crying, right? There's no past trauma. There's no past experience, and nobody's polluted his brain to tell me he can't do anything yet. That
Mhm.
comes later on in life, and
Yep.
that's life. So again, I'm not saying this stuff is wrong. This is how the world. I mean, this is just how the brain functions. Something you mentioned there is, yeah, gratitude. If you can start your day off every day with gratitude, you're gonna vibrate a more positive emotion to others you come in contact with.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and and again, this is stuff I've been familiar with. I just have never heard somebody, a neuroscientist, articulate it, but also weave it together. But yeah, the law of law of vibration, that's a big one. Turns out that human beings actually, sure, we use some words to communicate, but we vibrate our emotions as much as we speak our emotions with words.
Mhm.
Same with your eyes, right? When you're looking at somebody, that is a vibration of a feeling or emotion, and
Yep. Yep.
and
And
it's a real thing.
well, I think it's this. There's a couple things that come to mind there. I think I told you this. This was a year or two ago. I went to this private yoga thing with my
Uh-huh.
girlfriend's friend, and there was a woman there that was using those bowls. So you rub the bowl around the bowl, and they vibrate. They make vibrations.
Mm.
It's an energy kind of exercise.
Yeah.
And she said before the class started, she said, "Does anybody want me to do an energy reading on them?" And I'm like, "Well, what does that look like?"
Mhm.
She said, "I just put my hands above your head and around your face
Mhm.
and give you feedback on that." She put her hands over my head and shrieked. And she jumped back and said, "Oh my God, Mark, you have so much positive energy." And
Mhm.
I'm like, wow. And my daughter's after the class. I'm like, "What did you think about that?" I'm like, "Dad, you walk into a room, you change the temperature of the room." I'm like, "Really? No
Mhm.
shit." So
Yeah,
I
and
think,
that could go either way.
yes.
You can change the temperature for good or for bad.
Yep.
Make some people uncomfortable because you're so in tune, right? That doesn't mean everybody likes it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it can intimidate them, and they don't like you because you're doing it.
No
Uh,
question.
yeah,
No question. And it's beholden of me, I think, to be conscious of that, the possibility of going one way or the other. And to your point, if I take a couple of deep breaths before I walk into a room and just think about loving and being grateful, I'm going to have a much more positive effect on that room.
yeah,
I can do it in 2 minutes. I can do it in 30 seconds because it's a
yeah,
conscious move.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And something else, and I don't know if it came from this particular podcast or just the more I started to think about happiness, it shouldn't be about being happy. You can't be happy all the time, right?
Mhm.
That's not realistic. But to live a fulfilled life, fulfillment.
Mhm.
That's the other, I think, narrative we have to change. We should not be always looking for happiness. Doesn't mean you don't get some happiness and pleasure in I don't know, having a couple drinks, spending time with friends, going to a ball game, whatever. There's some happiness there, but we should be trying uh, to live a fulfilled life, fulfillment, and
Yep.
fulfillment is where you consciously uh, do things that fulfill your belief system, and maybe the good for others. Shouldn't be a selfish thing. And I thought that was a real good takeaway from this as well.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
difference
Fulfillment is
between yeah,
yeah, I think happiness is a bad choice if you're going to chase something. I
yeah,
think things like fulfillment, serving other people,
yeah,
joy,
mhm,
is very different than happiness. Happiness,
mhm,
I have it is akin to pleasure,
mhm,
and pleasure is kind of a dangerous double-edged sword, right?
mhm,
You can have too much, and you can have not enough, but it's not something to pursue.
mhm,
Happiness is kind of like crazy, right? What does it mean? What does that mean? We misuse the word, I think. I certainly do, but fulfillment's a great word, and
mhm,
I find when I'm helping other people, I am as fulfilled as any other time in my life.
mhm.
But
Yeah, it could be your work fulfills you. It could be, it's very an individual thing. So here's another one that he really gets into, or I'm adding my version of it. It's getting familiar with the past, present, and future because it's true, right? We're either living in the past, we're living in the present, or the future, and that is fear based. Often we're driven by fear. So the fear of something that happened to us in the past that we're projecting out in the present in the hopes to prevent that pain from coming into our life in the future.
hmm
So back
hmm
to self-awareness, right? Just being aware that, hey, just because I experienced this. I think I've shared before, right? Being dyslexic, I had a really bad experience when I was 10 years old with my school teacher asking me to read in front of the class, right?
Mm,
So it took me it took me a few decades to figure out, and more than that, that I was projecting out a lot of that unknowingly, right?
hmm
And then also remember, it wasn't just ask me to read; it was everybody in the class was laughing at me, and then what I did at recess, where I basically just beat the shit out of everybody playing. We used to call it smear the queer. You can't say that anymore, but
Yeah.
and that's probably why I went on to play football and rugby and all that stuff, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep. Yep.
but I also had a great teacher. That one was horrible, but the next year, very nice woman that was very kind, very helpful, and that kind of took me aside and helped me. So I try to focus on her.
hmm
And I'm talking like the fifth grade, right? Third, fourth, fifth grade. So, but those are past experiences that I probably were projecting out right up until recently. So it doesn't mean you stop doing it. You just become um, aware of it, right?
Yeah. I was going to say self-awareness, big time right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that some of the work that I've been doing lately, I have, the data, so to
yeah.
speak. Um, I've been doing that particular work, the SOS work, for just over a year. So consistently 5 days a week for 52 weeks.
Hmm.
And I probably give it an hour a day of energy. I prepare for it and then I go through it. And then there's some things that you can do during the day in 5-second increments, like visualizing stuff and
Hmm.
taking a couple of breaths. But it's like, and I built this story about what I want my future to look like, as if as if it
Hmm.
already looks like that.
Hmm.
And they call that visualization. I'm sure there are other words for it,
Hmm.
but I've now manifested some success. Can I attribute it to this work? I don't suppose scientifically that I could. I didn't run
What
any
do you mean you
experiment.
contribute? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Contribute to what work?
The manifestation, visualization, meditation work, the inner work that I've been doing. Can I attribute some recent success directly to that? Probably not. But do I suspect that it did contribute? I'm almost 100% sure that it did, because of
Well,
the
you're
way.
you're talking out both sides of your mouth, Mark.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, you can contribute it, not that you can't. I think you answered your
Um,
question. I just
well,
clear
yeah,
that
my
yeah.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I
it's
think it's a
like,
compliment. I think it's a total compliment. I'm not trying to keep. It's not a conflict. Is that yeah? You put the work in, and he talks about this.
yeah,
It's the little things you do every day
yep,
that turn into big things.
hmm
And I think you need to give yourself a little more credit for the discipline it took to do that every single day, and then manifesting that. That's not luck, and
No,
that's not a coincidence.
I
Yeah,
am proud of the consistency of that work, because consistency is something that I made part of my
yeah,
action. Is like, we talk about it all the time. Just show up every day, just show up, just show
yeah,
up.
yeah.
And so, no, I appreciate that, Jim. I appreciate
No,
you identifying that.
I'm yeah, no, I'm glad you just stopped and kind of reworked that because that is you need to tell yourself, hey, I did manifest this, and I've seen the good that's come from it, right?
Yep,
The
yep,
higher quality of life with others,
hmm
the work. Even he gets into manifesting a business. It does require kind of the same thing, right? Where you have this people believe you're vibrating something that somebody else believes in, where they want
hmm
to join you in this creation of a business or an idea. So
yeah,
as an inventor, I have to not just invent something, I have to believe it so much that I have to then find somebody that's going to join me to bring it to the world, right? Whether I license that or whether it's my patent attorney that has to take my ideas and write the patent, whether it's the
hmm
patent examiner by either issuing the patent or not. There's a lot to it, but it is a vibration. It is. I remember my first licensing deal. This is years ago. I jumped on a plane and flew to Chicago at the time. It was the largest tool maker of that particular category of clamps, and great company, good guy too, CEO. He was kind of difficult at first, but he looked at I was relatively new. That's right. I had my company. Was it? Yeah, I was pretty young, so I wasn't a cabinet maker. I was in sales, but but he looked across the desk and he believed that what I was saying was true. Like, hey, look at, if we make this, you can sell this many thousand. And that was a vibration. He took a chance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we still
Yeah, no,
we sell 5,000 units a month. That was over 25 years ago, still to this
yeah,
day.
yeah.
So but that's a vibration. That was a manifestation
Yeah.
of a thought
Yeah.
or an idea. It's absolutely, it's a real thing. This is not
No,
hocus pocus stuff.
there's no question about it. And I used to believe, I used to not believe in it when I didn't know much about it. And as I've investigated over the years, and my kids have pushed me, particularly my girls, into that space of manifestation and visualization and meditation and things like that. I want to go back to your distinction earlier about, we can live in the past, we can live in the present, or we can live in the future, because I think there's some juice there. I think the what I see through my investigation and my observations and my work is we all have a past, right?
Yeah,
And
we do. Childhood.
Yeah.
We also all have trauma. We all have experienced some type of trauma
Yep.
in our lives.
And
And it's all
it's not,
relative. So it's
yep.
it's not a contest of who has more trauma or less trauma. It's part of the human brain. It's part
Yeah, well, if it were a contest, I wouldn't want the trophy anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to say that about my divorce.
Yeah.
I don't want the trophy for the most contentious divorce, and that's going to be part of this, because what I was thinking, one of the most difficult things for me to get rid of was my anger towards my ex-wife, and that's my past, right? That's my trauma. It's one of my traumas, and you could go back to my childhood, and we could pick out. I've told you this before. My parents were born during the Depression, so scarcity was kind of more of a thing than abundance, and not that we weren't wealthy, but we certainly weren't poor. We were well off. My dad was an airline pilot, so we had stuff, but we didn't overdo stuff. Indulgence wasn't a thing. We were frugal, I guess, was the thing that was pushed. And that's stuck in my craw for a long time. Abundance scared me. Money and wealth were distasteful on some subconscious level. But the thing about forgiving my ex is this: some of the work I'm doing now, this guy makes a distinction that we all have two guys, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other talking to you. And he calls the positive one your sage, right? And he calls the negative one your saboteur. And we all have different saboteurs. And but the sage will look at that and say, yeah, she gave you 3 beautiful children, right?
Yeah.
She gave you humility. She gave you gratitude.
Yep.
There were so many good things that came out of that, but when you're in that shit, you don't see any of those. It's all anger and dust.
Yeah.
And then much of the work I'm doing has given me the ability to bring myself into a state of presence that's really nice, because it's the best place to be, is in the moment right now, right? And the future is, you can visualize positive things, but worrying about things that might happen, which we do all the time. I do it all the time, even though I know it's not worth my time. Is, I think, if I look back, Jim, and I'm interested in your thoughts too, that 90, maybe 95% of the things that I've worried about in my life never took place. They never came to fruition.
Yeah, because the human brain has a tendency to again project it. It's going to be worse than it is. And the feeling of that is actually worse than it actually happening. It's just the way it works. So, it's something when you were saying about what you went through with your divorce. And I think you're, a great example of this. We get bitter or we get better, right? It is a choice, but the default is to get bitter. And it takes a lot of work to overcome those emotions of that negativity and then projecting out in the world. I see a lot of people right now, and I'm not suggesting I'm living this higher life or whatever, but I see a lot of people in a lot of pain projecting out a lot of negativity. It's social media. It's kind of phenomenon that we're going through right now with the amount of social media and things like that. But also just, we talked about younger generations. They've been pumped a lot of things into their minds, for good or for bad, that are negative. And it's it's sad in a way, because they're the victim mentality, and none of them were actually actual victims. They're
No, I
always
think
they're
that,
speaking and feeling for other people, other groups, and
yeah.
it hasn't even affected them. But then that negativity that they're vibrating out to everybody they come in contact with is very, very apparent. But see, here's the where I'm starting to have this realization. I don't think it's kind to let them do that. I think it's a skill and you have to be very sensitive, but I think there's a way we can shift that way of thinking and then start to create positivity, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or it's a group of certain people. I'm not saying you can do this with everybody. Sometimes it's just better to walk away or not put yourself in that environment.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because we were both telling Mother's Day stories, and
Yeah,
that's kind of where this bubbled up from. And we don't need
yeah,
to get into the details of those,
yeah,
but I think that yeah, the question would be for me, because I do believe that I have the ability to impact things positively. Almost everything that I come across, I have the ability to do that.
yeah,
And you do too. I don't know that everybody does, but I think that I feel a responsibility. But you do have to pick your spots because you don't
yeah,
want to ruin Mother's Day or Thanksgiving or Christmas. And sometimes you just I walked away from some stuff this weekend just because there was no purpose to it. It wasn't going to help anybody. It would
mhm,
just have created more conflict, which was in a closed environment would have ruined the weekend potentially.
yeah,
So you got to pick your spots. However, as you said earlier, yeah, you can also be disappointed when you don't step up. Like that was a
yeah.
missed opportunity. I should
It
have
was a
done that.
missed
But
opportunity. Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah. But again, if let's talk about politics, right? Interesting because if you talk about politics, it doesn't go anywhere positive. Eventually it's going to go negative unless even if you're with people that have a same political worldview of politics, that doesn't even go very well. You feel like shit after you get done talking about it because it doesn't lead to anything, right? It's negative, 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 and then you end up the conversation ends on kind of negativity. When we really do have the choice to focus on some positive things that are going on in the world,
mhm.
and but that has to be very intentional. That can't just be a coincidental. So that's where I think you can shift the conversation if you try to. This particular conversation and on the Easter was it because I mentioned in fun, Trump versus Biden, bad idea, because everybody started getting all worked up, right?
Yeah,
But I said, hey, let's have the conversation without any names.
yeah,
Let's just talk about groups. How about we have the conversation? I won't say Biden if you don't say Trump. And it was almost a miracle how the conversation started to shift
hmm,
because it was about we all want the same thing. And then I guess it is that the association of that name with that group party, and now we're getting somewhere, right? And to say what's positive about what's going on. You can always find positivity, and you can always vibrate positive vibes as much as negative, but it
yeah.
takes
I
a little
think
bit of
if you,
work. Yeah,
yeah, if it does, it requires self-awareness, which
yeah,
keeps coming back to us. And I think the more we practice that, the better we get at that,
yeah.
like anything, right?
and
But I
and
think
and not to be self-righteous. It's very hard sometimes to be able to speak without sounding self-righteous, and that's
mhm,
how if somebody disagrees with you, that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to put you into this box that you can't get out of,
mhm,
and
mhm.
then criticize you or try to get good support from other people in the crowd to dislike you personally, even
You know
though,
what? Yeah, yeah. Well, personalizing things is never really a good
no,
way to go. I think I teach a lot about communication, and I think communication is just we're not as good at it as we could be. But remember I used to go to that thing once a month at the library where we talk
yeah,
about controversial issues, and
yep,
it
yep,
was called
mhm,
civil discourse and among other things. And I used to think to myself before I went in there, don't try to be right, don't try to change anyone's mind. Ask a lot of questions. I
mhm,
think the power of questions is because some people aren't self-aware. And if you ask them a question, sometimes it brings them to a state of self-awareness of something they formerly didn't think about.
mhm,
And questions are disarming for me.
mhm,
But if you go into these conversations, whatever they might be, and you do that subconscious kind of mindfulness work, that manifestation work, even for a second, you can
Mhm.
shift your energy
Yeah.
and walk in there and have a much more positive impact on people. But questions are just magical to me because questions aren't accusations. They're
Yeah.
not putting people into a box. They're opening up
Conversation based.
dialogue. Yeah.
You're right. It's to pose things as questions, as in versus statements, can completely change the vibration of a conversation, and
Yep.
that's just a skilled communicator, right?
Yep.
And then truly going into a conversation with the sincere desire not to want to be right, but to maybe learn something, and then come out of the conversation with being better than had you not had that conversation with that person.
Yep.
But that takes some work. Yeah, you often talk about leadership, but what are great leaders? Well, great leaders are people that can vibrate something that other people want to believe in, that the future is better than the past or the present.
Hmm.
That's what a good leader does. Right? Whether you're running a company to hire employees, whether you're anything, it applies to everything in this whole vibration. I got a couple of stories, but before we wrap up, what were some of those moments where you knew that your vibration changed the outcome of something? Whether it was it could be business, could be anything in life. Do you remember any particular things or events in your life that your vibration affected the outcome of something in a positive way, obviously, right? Very positive, where that it hadn't been for you and your 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 place at that time, the outcome could have been different.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm struggling to think about a specific time, but I'm also thinking about lots of different times. I remember, if you just to go back to my sports career, which wasn't as long as yours, but it was a pretty good one.
Sports is a good one, yeah. At
I
any
I
age, right? At
I
any point, yeah.
I always wanted the ball with 5 seconds left on the clock. I always wanted the ball.
Basketball,
Basketball. I
yeah.
always wanted to be getting up to the plate, in a tie ball game with 2 outs. I always wanted that role. I always wanted somebody to
You want to
toss
be
me.
at bat. You wanted
I
to
wanted,
be
yeah,
the
I
one
want that. And that,
that
and
had
that,
that last touch the ball to affect
yes,
the outcome
of a
of the game.
particular game. And I remember in most of the teams that I played for, after playing for them for just a little while, so there was some familiarity. Everybody knew Mark wants the ball, and then
Interesting.
everybody started thinking we should get Mark the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it reminds you of like the Tom Brady or even Patrick Malone, right? I mean, they know if the ball's in that guy's hand and there's X amount of seconds left, their chances of winning that game go way, way up. Some guys
Yeah,
just can't do it.
there's always a guy, there's always a
Yeah.
gal, there's always somebody. I've walked into plenty of rooms just feeling
Yeah.
wonderful about life,
Yeah.
and just watch the room just and get
Yeah.
enveloped in that wonder, and
Yeah.
I'm proud of that. And then there were, some of the toughest times. I remember going into my office on September 12th,
Mm.
20 some odd years ago, and I said to everybody, come on into the conference room. And I said, I don't know how everyone feels, but I do know that we shouldn't be here right now. So I'm going to dismiss everybody for the day. Go spend some time with your families and reflect on what's happened. But we're not working today.
Mhm.
And I got choked up, man. I got choked up, and I think that everyone in that room thought of me just a little bit differently after that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could feel it. I could feel it. How about you?
Yeah. Except there's a couple of them. I think the one, and it's just because I saw him. Yeah. I don't want to. One of my very, very good friends lost his daughter in a car accident, and we won the rugby national championship together. So a lot of us got together last week when we got the news. So we met up, and it reminded me of this one. This is my first national championship, but we had played. Yeah, I remember this well. This is but it was so we won the league championship the year before. We got knocked out of the playoffs so we didn't make it on. But this year we advanced, and then I had a neck injury. My C6 C7 had a herniated disc, So it in the final, I couldn't play in the final game. This is the national championship down in San Diego,
Mm.
and it was one of those spectacular San Diego days. You know, it's a national championship, so the place is completely packed. And the doctor just weeks before said, "Hey, listen, you can't play again. You know, you with that neck, if you take an injury, you're going to be a paraplegic. You know, like don't play.
Hmm.
It's your decision, but I highly recommend you don't play." Which was tough because I'd been, you know, playing like 10 years at that, but around 10 years or something like that. And I you know, I worked very hard to get there, and I can't even play the championship and the final game. So first half is we're losing the first half. Well, I I brought my cleats. I was in the stands, but I've actually brought my cleats.
Hmm.
And my wife didn't even know. And at halftime, I went underneath the bleachers and changed my put my gear on. And second half starts. We're losing. And I came in off the sidelines basically. Came in and we came back and won the national championship. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty cool. But
Wow.
it wasn't just me, by the way. It wasn't we had made some other changes too. We brought some other guys in too. So it wasn't like I was the only and I know I didn't score. I did take the ball and run it by 50 yards, tossed it off, and we scored, and that put us up or got us close. In the end, we ended up kicking a conversion and win the whole thing in the final seconds. But it was I think the reason I'm sharing it was because it was this energy shift, right?
Hmm.
That my teammates knew, man, if he's gonna come off and take that risk,
Hmm.
not to lose this moment, everybody's level raised.
Yep.
You know, my play was okay. I was just playing. It wasn't like I was like the best player on the field by no means whatsoever. But I think it just elevated the energy and everybody. Yeah, we came back and won the national championship. It was one of the coolest moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's makes me think of that's a great story. It makes me
yeah,
think of, Larry Bird did that one time
yeah,
coming out in a championship game, going back into the locker room because he's struggling with a bad back and stuff. And
yeah,
they thought he was and then he comes jogging out on the court and the energy in the place just shifted like dramatically.
yeah,
And the momentum that the team gained brought them back. And then
yeah,
there's a very famous one of Willis Reed doing the same thing with the New York Knicks
yeah,
back in the 60s or 70s. And he went out, he came back in limping. He was like dragging one
yeah,
of his legs, and then he just started scoring like crazy, and they won the championship. So
yeah,
yeah, there's countless
yeah.
examples of that. I think
But also the other team. Remember, the other team clearly had this game. They were winning by like 2 or 3 tries.
mhm,
That's how big. So the other team, talk about an energy shift, right?
mhm.
They're super confident they're going to win this game, and then all of a sudden one try, and then two, and then before you know it, their energy shifts, our energy changes,
Mhm.
and again, it wasn't just another game; it was the national championship, and it
You
was
see it. You see it. I've been watching some of the NBA playoffs because the Celtics are one of the top teams, and I enjoy watching them. And basketball, maybe more so than some sports, but I think all team sports, even individual sports, you can seriously see the moment that the momentum changes,
Mhm,
and it's
you
usually it's
can.
usually event driven, a great shot, a great
Mhm,
point, a great catch, whatever, a great something great
mhm.
happens, like, oh, that's above and beyond the Call of Duty, and the whole thing just shifts the other way. It
Well,
can
you're right.
happen in
It's one play
yeah,
that's a momentum shifter, and that's what it was. Again, I came in, it was a couple minutes. Somehow, somebody tossed the ball to me. I ran it down. Like I said, like midfield from midfield all the way through, tossed it off. We won. Boom, that was it. Everything at that point changed. Like we're gonna win this game.
yeah, yeah.
And,
Talk about it. Talk about energy. Talk about manifestation. I
yeah.
think the just to kind of wrap up, I think the things that I take away from this, and I think this is keeping it simple, keeping it down to just one or two things, is this whole notion of if we live in our past, we're going to be limiting our opportunities for our future. And there are different ways to get your arms around your past and your limiting beliefs or your trauma or whatever it is that's holding you back. We all have some of it. Some of us have a lot of it,
Yeah.
but you can get rid of it. You can put your arms around it and bring some level of control so that it doesn't get in your way. And it's really a wonderful thing to spend some time looking into, and then finding some type of practice that allows you to do that. And that's all the subconscious mind. Some of those same things, exercises for me, the meditation, the visualization, exercise, things like that, will get you into the present. And I think the target should be the present. Live in the moment to the extent that you can. And then just keep in mind that I think we're all in the same boat about the future. 90% of what we worry about is not going to happen. So figure out a way to get your arms around that. And I think that it's not going to lead you to happiness, because I think that's a false aspiration, but I think it will bring more joy into your life. And then as a result of you being more joyful, you're going to manifest that energy out into the world. And that's a thing, man. It's a thing.
Yeah, well said, Mark. I really, there's nothing to add to that. It was so well said. But like I said, it is a choice, right? You can vibrate out a better future for others, and that's what good leaders do, right?
Yeah.
Good leaders are dealers of hope of a better day, a better outcome.
Hope. Yeah. Don't be the old guy in your underwear with the shotgun on your rocking chair on the porch
talking about the past.
telling the kids to get the fuck off the lawn.
Yeah. And again, I'm not picking on anybody, so I'm not going to use any names, but even on Mother's Day, the conversation started going negative, and the energy in the room, it was like somebody just sucked the air out of the room, right?
Yeah.
Or we were outside, and it's hard to bring that back around. Once it starts going negative like that, it's really difficult to swing back later. So, kind of come into that without hijacking the conversation, but I do think we can consciously make that decision.
No question.
Yeah.
No question. Yeah. Thanks for bringing the topic to the table, Jim. That was fun.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
All right. See you.
Mark, until next week, huh?
Peace.